Hello and welcome. My name is Joanne Lockwood and I'm the founder and CEO of See Change Happen. Today, we're going to be introducing the topic of bisexuality. If you weren't aware, 23rd of September, which is a Friday, is Bisexuality Visibility Day. So today I'm joined by two wonderful and amazing guests. Miss Elara Hart, who's a marketing manager, multimedia designer, and aspiring keynote speaker, as well as being an awesome trans woman and also a pansexual. And we're also joined by Miss Kimberly Matthews. Kimberly is a digital artist, a trans woman, and bisexual from Colorado Springs all the way from the USA. And I can assure you, she is also awesome. So, hello, Elara. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you, Joanne. How are you?
Fabulous, thank you. And Kimberly, hello.
Hello.
Okay, so I've got a couple of questions that we can ask here. Please feel free to stop me if you find they're a bit personal, but let's see how we get on. So, Kimberly, let's start with you. What is bisexuality? What does it mean to you?
What bisexuality means to me, and the definition that I give to myself and for myself, is I'm attracted to more than one gender identity or sexuality. I know that when you ask like 10 different people, you'll get 10 different answers, but that's what it means for me.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. That's kind of the definition I might use. Elara, you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think it's an interesting statement because a lot of people think because of the term bi, they automatically think two, and therefore I think a lot of people are quite stuck in that mindset of obviously two genders when it's not just two genders. And actually hearing Kimberly say, it's multiple for her. It's bi meaning more than one, and it just goes to show that it is different for everybody. So.
A term that I often hear people getting confused with is pansexuality. And people are unsure of the difference between pan and bi. What do you think, Elara? What's you describe yourself as pansexual. So what do you mean by pansexual as opposed to bisexual?
Well, yeah, again, echoing sort of what Kimberly said, it's a very personal thing how you view sexuality. And in terms of how I see the differences is that bisexuality is more an attraction to potentially masculine, feminine features. It is more of a physical attraction. I think gender matters is the bottom line in bisexuality. It doesn't matter which genders, but the point is that gender matters to you in terms of a relationship. Whereas I believe pansexual is more, to get a bit deep, is more being connected to a person's soul, a person as they are. It's more to do with not seeing the gender and not seeing the gender as an important factor in your attraction to that person.
I love that. I really relate to that. It's a really good description. So, Kimberly, I've heard of the term biromantic and panromantic. So how's that different for bisexuality and pansexuality?
It's like biromantic and panromantic, I believe, are simply that you can find yourself in a romantic feeling and emotional relationship with an individual, but there is an element of a non-sexual attraction, I believe.
So it's about hugging and connection rather than getting down and dirty under the bedclothes. If you like.
Yeah. It's more of that emotional attraction rather than that physical demand or desire.
But does that mean that bisexuality to you is more of a physicality and a physical attraction?
That's what I would say is the initial spark of attraction. Naturally, who a person is on the inside matters. We're human beings. Of course, the emotional side of who a human being is going to matter to us. But when it comes to that initial attraction, yes, that femininity or that masculine energy is what I find most attractive about somebody.
Okay, so there's both physical, as we talked about there, the sexuality element, if you like, and also the emotional, the panromantic, the pansexual, the bisexual, the biromantic. So it's a blend, really, and depending on how you identify, depending on how the person that you're attracted to identifies and where that connection lies, if it's physical or emotional.
I think it's a nice way of putting it, and I think the reason why we're doing this, of course, is to kind of raise awareness for bisexuality, because I personally feel they're quite misrepresented, and there isn't enough representation for them, and a lot of people make some very snap judgments about what bisexuality actually is, and then that can be steeped even further into this idea of there only being two genders, which obviously the three of us do not agree with.
Yeah, high five to that one. Yeah, one of the things, in May we have Ida Hobbit, International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Transphobia, Lesbophobia, all the phobias. This biphobia is kind of a hidden phobia. We talk about homophobia, we talk about transphobia quite actively, but even within the LGBTQIA plus community, we still see biphobia in there. Certainly between maybe the LG element of the community. Why do you think there's so much misunderstanding or phobia around people who are bi?
I feel like maybe there's this idea that bisexuals are confused, or you need to pick a side or something like that, or that bisexual identity may even invalidate a certain sexual identity that you have if you're straight or gay. And naturally, gays going through what they're going through in terms of, social awareness and whatnot, they want as many people in there as they can get and muster. It's a lot easier to just flag someone as gay in certain situations. But less than phobia, I feel like it's more of an erasure. It is more flagging for the team, I guess. It's like, oh, it's like if you were a man and you're bisexual and you're dating another man, that just makes you gay. Even though you've dated women, even though you're attracted to women, it doesn't matter what you think. It just matters about who you're with at any given time and the societal perceptions of you.
I mean, I've heard people have relationship breakdowns because their current partner, who thought they were heterosexual, found out they'd had a same sex relationship in the past and they actually identified as bi. The partner almost can't handle the fact that the person is bi when they thought they were straight, even though they're with them now. Yeah.
Yep. And to me, it's like my partner, because all of those stereotypes came in. It's like, because I was presenting masculine at the time with my partner, and I said I was bisexual, and it was, oh, you better not cheat on me. Oh, you're just like, are you really just gay? Do you just have a problem deciding? Everything like that. So there was definitely a stigma in regards to me coming out as bisexual, male presenting. However, coming out as bisexual, female presenting, there's a completely different reaction from people. Most of the people react as like, "Oh, wow, that's really kind of hot." It's so that just shows the difference between how society looks at, bisexual men and bisexual women.
I've certainly heard it within the lesbian community that there are many lesbians who will only date or have relationships with people who are who've never been with a man themselves. So if you start off in your early years having relationships, getting married, doing something very, very vanilla and very old school traditional, and then you come out in your 30s, 40s, or whatever age you come out, you are inherently kind of bisexual or at a point, because you've obviously been questioning, you've obviously had relationships. Whether you then your sexuality moves into, and or you become more honest with yourself about your same sex attraction, and you lose that opposite sex attraction. But there is an element of that kind of grey area where you can be a bi, hidden bi. I think we call it hidden bi, where when you're in a same sex or an opposite sex relationship, people think you're either gay or you're straight, but actually you're just with a partner at the moment, and you're still bi in your head. You're just not actually. You're either straight or you're gay at that point. It's like Schrodinger's sexuality. You either are or you aren't. You're not never quite sure where you are until the situation changes. So, what do you think about that, Elara?
I, I do. It's quite interesting that you'd ask me that question. So yeah, no, I do have a friend who identifies as bisexual, and they said that was one of the major problems that they did face. They were married to a man and therefore was labeled as straight. So when told people that they were bisexual, a lot of people made a lot of unsavory comments. A lot of people didn't take it seriously, and I think that's kind of what the point of all of this is. We're kind of rounding on this idea of what can we do to make a difference? How can we be better? Certainly at work, in organizations. And I think ultimately it comes down to not making these assumptions. Kimberly being here is fantastic because having that lived experience actually talked about and understanding from a real lived experience point of view of how it affects people, that kind of stereotyping, that kind of flippant reaction. And that's the kind of thing we want to kind of stop. We want to encourage people to ask more questions and to understand. Pretty much going back to the first thing that Kimberly said, which was it's different for everybody. You ask 10 different people what bisexuality is to them, you get 10 different answers. So we should all be asking questions and making less assumptions.
For sure, and I completely agree, and obviously that's why we're doing this Bi Visibility Day. But we still hear people within the LGBT community describing people as bi as being greedy, as you said, indecisive, flip-flopping, questioning, unable to commit, or maybe you're just deluding yourself that you're gay, sort of thing. It's kind of like you have to put on this front of being straight for 1 minute and gay the next minute. So there's this mistrust almost. That's which is why some of the biphobia exists, isn't it? It's this, because people are happy to be fluid in their sexuality or their gender or both, then there's this mistrust, and it's the same sort of stigma that maybe trans people face, is where people don't know who you are sometimes. You've got this sort of fluidity, and people like binary, don't they? They like to know if you're in this box or that box. But if you're kind of like sprinkled all over the place, it's where people get really randomly hung up about this stuff, don't they?
Yeah, it's the grey areas.
So if either of you personally faced discrimination for being out as pan or bi?
I haven't been any in sort of a professional world and out in the open world. Not really. I haven't been, because most people won't go around assuming someone's sexuality unless you're in like a dating sort of scene. But when it comes to my personal life, like I mentioned, I had a partner when I explained to them I was bisexual, and they immediately their view of me immediately changed, because they immediately became insecure in the relationship. And it was very awkward. And I think a lot of that has to do with how society tends to push each gender toward the opposite, because presenting male in my teenager, hormones are going crazy, and it's like, okay, dating girls is what you're supposed to be doing. So I didn't have any problems with that. I didn't have any problems going out and finding a girl, but it was that attraction to men thing that was like pushed in the back of my head. And that didn't happen until way later in development. I was way late coming out and admitting to myself that I was bisexual. But when it comes to like discrimination or anything like that, other than the odd, I don't know what that means, why are you bi and why are you not pan, those type of questions usually pop up more often than not.
And just to build on what Kimberly said, I think ultimately this interpretation, this idea that people who are bisexual are just greedy, it's kind of like, well, is it greed in a world where people just love each other? Does it matter why somebody else is attracted to another person? Are you saying that the dating pool is bigger or smaller for certain people because of their sexual alignment? But ultimately, what connects to people is more than just gender. I think that's what we can boil all of this down to, is that there is that initial spark, that physical attraction, as you said, Kimberly, that kind of element is what draws you in. But whether or not you have a relationship, whether or not that's a lasting relationship, all of that, all of those elements, you can't just go about spouting to people, hey, it's all about gender, because there's more to it than just that. And to say people are greedy and hogging people that you probably otherwise wouldn't be with. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, or just this idea that I walk around thinking everyone that crosses my vision I'm attracted to.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that for any sexuality.
Absolutely.
Yeah, completely. And I think we also have to separate without getting too down and dirty here in this work video, is that when people may be engaging in, I don't know, you go out for the evening and suddenly you find yourself back at someone's house, two men and a woman in bed, or two women and a man in bed. So those kind of relationships are kind of on the fly, spur of the moment type, or here we are. Does that make someone bi, or is that just opportunistic and you're enjoying the moment with whoever happens to be in that bed at the same time? Because some people, if they're doing that, they wouldn't class themselves as gay. They wouldn't necessarily class themselves as polyamorous, really. They might just class themselves as lucky. And wow, what a great night.
No, I think it does have to do with people's own confidence and comfortability in their own sexual identity, as well as the boundaries that they outline. It could be that, it's like these two straight men and the woman go back to an apartment and they have an intimate evening together, but the males might draw some boundaries. It's like, I don't want to interact with you in any sort of way. I just want to interact with her, and he might agree, or something like that. But it really does depend on the individual's boundaries that do it, because having a threesome doesn't make you gay. I would say that even if you were a man and you had an intimate evening with a man, that doesn't even necessarily make you gay. It just, the only thing that makes you gay is you saying that you are gay.
That's essentially, I tend to find that sexuality is an ever evolving thing. It can be for some people, especially for myself. Figuring out that I was pansexual did not happen overnight. It's not something that I've been identifying as my whole life. In fact, it's only in the last sort of 6 months that I've even come to this conclusion. There was a time when I didn't know I was a trans woman, so in the beginning, presenting male, assumed I was straight. Realized then that I've been lesbian my whole life. But then I met my other partner. I'm currently in a polyamorous relationship with Kimberly and our other partner Jay, who is a man. And I've never had a relationship with a man before. I've never dated a man. I've never had much of an encounter with a man in an intimate way. Um, and that's kind of the point where I realized that I am pansexual, because there was an attraction to him where I've never been attracted to that gender, and it suddenly dawned on me it's more to do with the person. So sexuality can be an evolving thing. It can be an explorative thing where you explore with people on a one night stand. It is just for fun. People are allowed to exist and have fun without having to stick these labels on people. And yeah, it doesn't change your sexuality.
And that's the problem, isn't it? Labels. Aren't labels the issue, where we're living in this world where people have to define you as straight, gay, bi, pan, trans, cis, non-binary, whatever it may be. We want to put people in these boxes all the time. And the trouble is, when you mix gender identity and sexuality, that's not two linear scales with two ends on it. I think of it as a kind of a cloud where you can exist in this cloud in any particular moment, depending on how you are, how you feel, who you're with, and your sexuality, your identity all evolve. So as a trans person myself, trying to understand my sexuality in binary terms, it just doesn't work for me. That's why I use the term pan, because it means I don't have to explain it any more than it's somewhere in this cloud of identity. And it's wherever I am today and wherever I feel now, it works for me. And I don't have to judge myself or put myself into a particular box to be something for somebody else. And I think that's really the key to it, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm completely on board with that.
It's Bi Visibility Day on the 23rd of September, as I mentioned. So what can we do? What can our audience do right now? How can we create visibility? How can we overcome some of these barriers that we've talked about?
For me personally, it would just be, just take us at our word. If in a conversation, if someone identifies as bisexual, there's nothing further to engage beyond that. There's no need for, the fifth degree. It's just constantly most individuals will was like, oh, really? So it's like, what do you do? Like one more than the other? Or there's just a constant questionnaire that people deal with when you come out as bi. Just acknowledge someone as bi, and acknowledge when someone is talking about someone who has, and their sexuality comes into question, maybe really, really consider what that person's sexuality might have been, because, history will paint, people as homosexual or straight based on the partner that they had at the time. It's the same thing with that gay erasure from way back when we were allowed to talk about that in public. So bisexual erasure is just about listening. It's about understanding and just helping educate yourself when it comes to bisexual individuals and what that means. And just don't take one person's word for it. Go out and just chat with everybody that you can find.
Great advice. Let's take another person's word for it. Elara, what do you think?
Genuinely, I think it's about listening. It's about having compassion, and it's about understanding the different perspectives and the makeups, and not making those assumptions. Not just, as Kimberly said, reeling off a questionnaire when somebody tells you information about themselves. Don't rely on your own judgment of something that maybe you don't know a great deal about, or you don't identify in that way. For example, Kimberly is talking from a lived experience. She identifies as bisexual. So as far as I'm concerned, she's just as good an authority as anybody else that says I identify as bisexual. Whereas I myself, as a pansexual, wouldn't want to make any assumptions about bisexuality. And I think that would be kind of unfair. And even if I did make those assumptions, I would want to, if I had the opportunity, speak to Kimberly on a personal level and find out what she thinks, and see if maybe I can really listen and change the way that I think, and not think that I know better.
So we're avoiding labels. We avoid putting people into boxes. We're avoiding deciding what someone's sexuality means to them without involving them in that conversation. And the same, we would say the same about gender identity as well. So it's around listening to the person, and I think the other key thing is you don't have to understand what they're saying. You just have to go, okay, you get it. Doesn't matter if I do or not. It's fine. I don't understand. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me. It's not my problem. Not my issue. As long as I say, "Wow, thank you for taking your time to explain that to me. I hope you're happy and be happy." So that's what we really want here. Okay, so that's been an interesting chat with Kimberly. Thank you, Kimberly, all the way from Colorado Springs in the USA.
I'm very happy to be here.
Elara Hart, all the way from Portsmouth in the UK, and myself, Joanne Lockwood, all the way from Chichester. We are inclusion and belonging specialists with See Change Happen. We also provide advice and consultancy to organisations around gender identity, sexual orientation, around Pride months. We do talks and keynotes. So we'd love to hear from you if you'd like to find out more. And why not use the comments and chat at the bottom? If you're not already doing so, please subscribe, click the bell, all the usual stuff. We'd love to keep in touch with you. So absolutely fine. Whoever you are, whatever your sexual preference, whatever your gender identity, the key thing is I hope you're happy. I hope you're happy with the person you love and you enjoy being with them. So good night. Thank you.